The film begins with a scene from a 1970s game show called To Tell the Truth, where the real Frank Abagnale Jr. appears as one of the contestants. This sets the tone for the film, highlighting the theme of deception and the fascinating life of Frank. Frank William Abagnale Jr. grows up in a loving yet financially unstable household in New Rochelle, New York. His father, Frank Abagnale Sr., is a charismatic businessman who constantly struggles with financial problems and legal issues, while his mother, Paula Abagnale, is a French woman who is more concerned with appearances and social status. Despite their financial troubles, the family enjoys a comfortable lifestyle, and Frank idolizes his father, who often tells him that it's important to look successful in order to be successful. Frank Sr.'s philosophy on life deeply influences young Frank. The first turning point in Frank's life occurs when his parents separate. This event deeply affects Frank, who is particularly close to his father. When Frank is asked to choose between living with his mother or his father, he runs away instead, choosing to start a life on his own. With little more than his charm and confidence, Frank begins his life of crime. His first con involves check fraud. Using a checkbook his father gave him, Frank forges and cashes checks. He quickly realizes that he can make more money by opening multiple accounts at different banks and writing checks back and forth. Frank soon grows bolder. He discovers that he can pass as an adult with the right wardrobe and demeanor. He begins to pose as a substitute teacher at his new high school. When the real teacher finally catches on, Frank leaves the school, but the experience gives him a taste of the power of deception. One day, while at an airport, Frank observes the respect and attention given to airline pilots. He decides to impersonate a Pan Am pilot, figuring that it would provide him with the opportunity to travel for free. Frank obtains a Pan Am uniform by pretending to be a high school student working on a project about careers in aviation. He convinces a Pan Am executive to give him a tour of the facilities and ends up with a uniform and an identification badge. Using his new pilot persona, Frank starts deadheading, which is a practice where pilots hitch rides on other airlines to reach their destinations. Frank masters the art of forging Pan Am payroll checks, cashing them all over the country. His charm and confidence make him nearly undetectable. He successfully poses as a pilot for 2 years, traveling around the world and cashing millions of dollars in fraudulent checks. Meanwhile, the FBI becomes aware of the fraudulent checks circulating across the country. Carl Hanratty, Tom Hanks, an experienced but somewhat dull and humorless FBI agent, is assigned to the case. Carl is dedicated and methodical, but he initially has difficulty convincing his superiors of the magnitude of Frank's operations. Carl's first break comes when he traces one of the forged checks to a hotel where Frank is staying. Carl and his team rush to the hotel, but Frank manages to slip away by pretending to be a Secret Service agent. He even convinces Carl to let him go, further frustrating and embarrassing the agent. After narrowly escaping Carl, Frank decides to lay low for a while. He moves to Georgia, where he meets Brenda Strong, Amy Adams, a sweet and naive young woman who works as a nurse. Wanting to impress Brenda and her conservative family, Frank pretends to be a doctor. He forges a Harvard Medical School diploma and secures a job as a resident supervisor at a local hospital. Despite having no medical training, Frank manages to keep up the ruse by delegating most of the actual medical work to other doctors and nurses. His charm and quick thinking allow him to maintain his cover for some time. He and Brenda fall in love, and Frank asks Brenda's father, Roger Strong, Martin Sheen, for his blessing to marry her. Roger, who is also a lawyer, is impressed by Frank and offers him a job at his law firm. Frank accepts, but he knows that his past is catching up with him. He starts to feel the pressure of maintaining multiple identities and the constant fear of being caught. Carl Hanratty becomes more determined to capture Frank. He studies Frank's methods and patterns, learning to predict his moves. Carl's dedication begins to pay off as he slowly closes in on Frank. Carl tracks Frank to Georgia and confronts him at Brenda's engagement party. Frank manages to escape again, but not before Brenda realizes that he has been lying to her about his identity. Heartbroken and feeling betrayed, Brenda cooperates with the FBI, providing them with crucial information about Frank's whereabouts. With the FBI closing in, Frank decides to adopt yet another identity. He forges a Columbia Law School diploma and passes the Louisiana bar exam by studying for 2 weeks. He takes a job as an assistant prosecutor in the Louisiana State Attorney General's office, continuing his high-stakes con while evading Carl and the FBI. Frank's success as a lawyer is short-lived, however. Carl is relentless in his pursuit, and Frank's luck begins to run out. Feeling the pressure and knowing that his options are running out, Frank decides to return to his roots in New York City, hoping to reconnect with his father. Frank visits his father, only to find that his parents' divorce has taken a heavy toll on him. Frank Sr. is now struggling with alcoholism and financial ruin. Frank is deeply affected by his father's condition and the realization that he can never return to his old life. Determined to leave his life of crime behind, Frank plans to flee to Europe. He arranges to meet Brenda at the Miami International Airport, hoping to take her with him. However, Carl and the FBI are waiting for him at the airport. In a final act of desperation, Frank manages to evade capture one last time by running across the tarmac and boarding a flight to Europe. Frank continues his con in Europe, cashing forged checks in multiple countries. However, his freedom is short-lived. The French police, tipped off by Carl, arrest Frank in a small French village. He is extradited to the United States, where he faces numerous charges of fraud and forgery. Frank is sentenced to 12 years in a maximum security prison. His life of luxury and adventure comes to an abrupt end as he faces the harsh realities of prison life. However, Carl Hanratty continues to visit him, recognizing Frank's extraordinary talents and intelligence. Carl offers Frank a deal. He can serve out the remainder of his sentence working for the FBI, using his skills to help catch other check forgers and con artists. Frank accepts the offer, and over time, he and Carl develop a mutual respect and understanding. Frank's expertise proves invaluable to the FBI, and he is eventually released on parole to continue working with them. He rebuilds his life, going on to become a successful consultant and lecturer on fraud prevention.